Wednesday, which will only be muscular system.
So only muscle, we're not going to trick us, right?
Don't trick us. I'm gonna make sure. Because for my Calista is my.
I'll text you.
Yes.
So muscle only wants to
You want these?
Can you just put it?
Over here.
Sorry, I will spill water just today. I spill water.
That's what it in there. I need your lab exams, please. Give it to me. Everybody. Lab exams, if not, you will get 0. Remember, I will give you 0. No problem to write 0, right?
It's from
Okay. I'm sorry. Do I have all the lab exams? So do you have your books? Open up your books. So today we start with our muscular system. So your test next Wednesday. So I suggest you read ahead, okay? For the test next Wednesday, you should know the muscles in the body, okay? So the basic muscles. There is a nice worksheet, a muscle worksheet, the little red riding hood. You see, you have in your Bio 241 worksheets the little red riding hood. That will help you in the way I test for the muscular system. So in the past, I don't know, I used to have a picture of, like I had a picture of the skeleton, you label the bones. But then I always change. Sometimes what I do, I would do different activities and I'll ask you, what muscle do you think was able to do this job? Or like I say, let's say if the masseter contracted, what movement is going to happen? Will that help you open your mouth or close your mouth? So you should know where is the masseter, right? Or let's say if the triceps, in raising my hand, did this involve contraction of triceps or biceps? So you should know that. So today is Wednesday, right? You need to start reading your book so that you keep on going up in your grades, maintaining your grade, okay? Don't wait for Monday for us to finish your lecture, okay? So the muscular system is made up of muscle, of course. The main player of the muscular system are your muscles. It's a good day. God answered my prayers for you guys. He answered, he just said wait.
That's what it is. Okay, I like that response. Be patient. Faith without works is dead.
No, much
Okay, what chapter? For
9.
Chapter 9, okay.
So our next lab one will be the skeleton.
Just all bones. Yes.
I panicked because I went, oh my god, I just printed out all those cards and I don't need them. No, I need them.
Okay, so what you need to remember as far as muscle is concerned, you need to know by heart the 3 types of muscle. And you know, it's not chapter
It's 9.
9. Okay. You know now what your muscles are, right? What are the 3 types of muscle? skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle. You should know them. You should know where you find. You should be able to differentiate the three of them, right? So, histologically, I can ask you many ways. Differentiate muscle histologically, meaning what you see under the microscope. Differentiate according to location. So histologically, you can say presence or absence of striations, right? Because smooth muscle will not have any, or number of nucleus, because smooth muscle will only have one, and same with cardiac muscle, right? And then what else? Maybe I'll ask you nervous innervation or nerve stimulation. So which one is voluntary, which one is involuntary? You should know those things, okay? And so there's a nice summary right here. I lifted this from Tortora. See, I like the way it's even there's even a drawing of muscle. Okay, before anything else, so there it is. There's where do you find this skeletal muscle? Always, that's why it's called skeletal. Where you have your bones, there's skeletal muscle. Then cardiac is in your heart. Then smooth muscle is everything inside. So when you think of an activity that involves some kind of movement, it must contain muscle. You call it smooth muscle, okay? So it's not hard to differentiate the three of them. We need to remember, what does muscle do for us, the function? So we know this, right? When it contracts, it helps us move. It helps to stabilize body position. This is your muscle tone. That's why there is no such thing as muscle to be relaxed. Muscles are continuously contracting to help you maintain muscle tone, your posture. So that's why when we talk about muscle metabolism, it will make sense why even a couch potato like my Baba still gets hungry, you see? Because there's always a group of muscles contracting. And you need to remember this. Remember, I told you that, right? It generates heat. It's the one. When it contracts, it generates. It gives off a lot of heat. And the blood transports that or distributes that heat so the rest of the body gets warm. You need to maintain normal body temperature. So, what is it in muscle that's able to do these jobs? Here. Okay? You need to remember. Of course, we know that contractility, it's able to contract, right? You need to remember the difference between these two, extensibility and elasticity. Elasticity, just think the rubber band, when you pull, it goes back to its original shape. And that's very important for us to remember. Any activity, like for flexing, I see, do you know that you're stretching your triceps? But then, because of the elastic property, it's able to go back to its original. What is this telling me? It's telling me you have elastic fibers in muscle. You see? What did you just study? We just studied the elastic fibers very easily injured by cigarette smoke. So people who smoke can also have muscle problems. You have elastic fiber. So the elastic there's elastic fiber in muscle. So cigarette, the chemicals in cigarette just damages elastic fibers wherever you find it in the body. You see? So the magnitude of cigarette damage is not only in the lungs. You have them becoming hypertensive because you see when we get to bio-242, but this is very important, okay? You remember there's elastic fibers in muscle. And then excitability, very important for you to know that too, which means no muscle will contract unless it's stimulated, you see. If you had a stroke, your muscle is healthy and yet you can't move it, you see, right? Because you had a stroke, you cut the nerve supply. Muscles rely on nerve stimulation so it can do its job. Same with heart, same with smooth muscle. All muscle need to be stimulated so then it can contract. Don't forget that, okay? So, we're going to study muscle physiology by looking at a typical skeletal muscle. So, we study how muscle works by using skeletal muscle. But before anything else, I want you to look at this picture, okay? So you see, when you buy your steak, you see there's that gray, what do you call it? It's got the white things. white things. Anyway, there's that's where you find the elastic fiber. You remember connect. Connective tissue connects muscles. So you see, there's collagen fibers in between. There's the elastic. That's how, and that's the one that can get damaged by cigarette smoke. So they end up, maybe sometimes they complain of muscle fibromyalgia, and then they can't pinpoint how they ended up having that one. It must be maybe they were exposed to cigarette smoke, or they were smoking for a while, you see. So there's muscles. But look at this picture. What's this? This is a
Tendon.
yes, very good. This is a tendon, right? And there's my skeletal muscle. There's my bone. We know that muscle inserts to the, by the way, you know origin, insertion. Are you familiar with those two terms? So every muscle has 2 points of attachment. One is called the origin, which is the immovable attachment. And the insertion is the one that will move. Okay? Does it make sense that muscle, when it inserts, it's always going over a joint? Does it make sense? If, let's say, look at maybe my biceps, I'm looking at my biceps maybe. If the biceps originated in the head of the humerus, and it inserted right here in the olecranon fossa of the humerus, when it contracted, will there be any movement?
Yeah.
None. If it inserts here and
no.
here, no movement. So does it make sense? All muscles, they have to go over a joint. So when it contracts, it will move. You see? Okay? So you see the difference. Know the difference between origin and insertion. Okay? But look at, what you need to know is muscle does not directly insert to the bone. You see? So these are the individual muscle fibers, and they're held together by collagen. Tendon, remember, tendon is collagen. So that's like the candy wrapper on each end. And that's the one that fuses with the bone. What is the protein in bone? It is, bone is made up of what protein? What is the protein in bone? No, protein. Collagen. And what is tendon made of? Collagen. Right? So in other words, this tendon, when it gets to the bone, it becomes the bone. You see, the fusion is so strong. They say that you have more of a tendency to break the bone than this connection right here. It becomes the sharpest fibers of your bone. Okay? So really, when muscle contracts, it is not the one that moves the bone. It contracts and it generates tension on the tendon. The tendon is the one that will transfer the tension to the bone so you will move. You see? That's why you notice if you have tendinitis, it's not the muscle that's injured, it's the tendon, but yet you can't move. You see? Because it is this one really that will pull the bone. Okay? So you need to remember that. Now, we're going to study muscle physiology by looking at a typical muscle cell. So we're familiar with the shape of a typical cell like this, right? Round. What are the parts? What's this? Yes, very good. What's this?
Cell membrane.
Yes, very good. And what's this one? Yes, okay. Everybody, very good. Okay, so now, instead of a round cell, which is what we're familiar with, look at how muscle looks like. Muscle is cylindrical. It's like this. You saw it under the microscope, right? So now we're introduced to another shape, the cylindrical shape. So, you know, if you see anything that starts with this one, this refers to what body system? Keratino? Skin. Or integumentary system. How about if it starts with this one? It refers to skeletal system, bone, okay? Now, when you see anything that starts with sarco, or myo, you know this now refers to the muscular system. Okay? Okay. So the cytoplasm, some books, when you see me write down sarcoplasm, you know I'm just referring to the cytoplasm of muscles. Okay? Then the cell membranes, maybe I'll write sarcolemma. It's just the cell membrane of your muscle. So look at what does muscle have? So it can do its job. It must have a nucleus. So there's several nuclei here because this is skeletal muscle, right? It's multinucleated. If it's cardiac muscle, you'll just have one. What else do you think? What do you think will muscle need so it can do its job? It needs. So it can contract. How does muscle? What does it need so it can?
Nerves.
Nerves. Okay, nerves. But inside the muscle cell, what do we need? We need
Energy.
energy. Very good. Where do you get your energy? Look at it. Has mitochondria. So I'm thinking the more I use the muscle, the more mitochondria it will have. Let's say for Calista here, she likes to text, maybe text. I'm thinking this will have a lot of mitochondria, okay? Some of the muscles we don't use, not too much mitochondria, okay? So what does the mitochondria need so it will do its job? What does the mitochondria require? What else? So it can convert the glucose to energy. So it can convert the glucose to ATP. What does the mitochondria need? It needs
Calcium.
oxygen.
Okay.
Right? So look at, do you see this? Myoglobin. Are you familiar with hemoglobin? What does hemoglobin do?
Carries oxygen.
Yes, very good. So hemoglobin carries oxygen in red blood cells. Look at, muscle has its own hemoglobin. It's called myo for muscle. Myoglobin. So muscles already have its own myoglobin. What does myoglobin do? It traps oxygen, you see? It's always ready to feed the oxygen to the mitochondria when we start working out or we start doing whatever activity we need. Okay? So we said that glucose is the main source of energy, right? Look at what muscle also has. Glycogen. Right? So we're just analyzing the content in every muscle cell and trying to figure out why. See? It has nucleus, has a lot of nucleus. If it's skeletal muscle, one if it's heart, one if it's smooth muscle. It has mitochondria for energy because this is the one where you generate ATP. But we know mitochondria needs oxygen. Look, it also has myoglobin. If you remember the word hemoglobin, and you know myo means muscle, it must be the hemoglobin in muscle. And you should remember, hemoglobin binds oxygen. And there it is, see? And then what do we need for energy? The main source is always glucose. Look at what it has. It also has glycogen granules. Right? Look at, there is also what you call sarcoplasmic reticulum. Sounds like endoplasmic reticulum, except you replace the endo with sarco. To remind you, we're talking about muscle. Sarcoplasmic reticulum. And look at what it has. It has these little pink things. You write pink things. No, I'm just kidding. What are these pink things? Calcium. So look, the muscle has plenty of calcium, but under resting conditions, that calcium is stored inside the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay? Before we visit what calcium does, we look at the last important layers in muscle contraction, and these are your filaments, your thick filament and your thin filament, which is actin and myosin. Actin is the thin filament actin sounds like thin. So actin is my thin. So if that's my thin, my thick is my myosin. The way I try to remember myosin, it's 3 syllables. It's a thicker word. Actin is only 2 syllables. It's a thin word. So this actin and myosin, look at, they're arranged in a regular, this is what we see under the microscope, those striations, you see? Because of the arrangement of the actin on each side of the myosin. So the dark one must be my thick, because it's thick, that's the myosin. And the light thin ones, it's the thin filament, it's the actin. So they are the ones that accomplish muscle contraction. You see that over here. To be able to contract, they need calcium. Okay? The calcium normally is locked up in sarcoplasmic reticulum. It's inside there. What will tell the calcium to come out? Nerve stimulation. So that's why I told you excitability is a property of muscle. You need to excite the muscle first before it can even contract. And so this is what you mean by excitation, contraction, coupling. Excitation, contraction, coupling. It means you need to excite the muscle first before it can contract. Let's look at the exact event that happens. Look at this one. So I'm going to look at this one then. Right here, you see there is the, wait, not that one. Over here. Look. There is the nerve, there is the neuron. It's key to stimulate. None of these events will happen if you injure the neuron. You will be what? Paralyzed. Right? So the nerve stimulates the muscle. When it stimulates the muscle, you just follow this step by step. If you master this, the story, this tells you the story. So your bedtime story will be this one for the next few nights. So you just can picture in your head what's going on. Okay, so look at, the nerve stimulates the muscle. It releases a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. We're going to study that more when we study the nervous system. But the result of stimulating this muscle is, it says you generate a muscle action potential. This means you woke up the muscle. Okay? And then what is the result of waking up the muscle? Look at what is the result. You release the calcium that was normally stored in the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Again, stimulate, result, muscle action potential, which causes the release of calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So now the calcium is in the cytoplasm. Where is it going to go? It's going to bind to this actin. Then contraction will happen. So, are you good so far? I'm going to go look at this one right here in higher magnification. We want to see what are the events really going on here. So this is excitation, contraction, coupling. I want to visit that word contraction. What is the actual process of contraction in every muscle? So we have to look at this one. We have to look at a sarcomere. The sarcomere is the smallest unit of muscle. So, which means, what does that mean? It means that whatever happens to a sarcomere represents what happens to muscle when it contracts. Sarcomere. Sarcomere. So muscle is nothing but sarcomeres attached end to end. So you see, this is one sarcomere, then there's another one, there's another one, there's another one. Okay. So what is the composition of sarcomere? Thick and thin filament. Okay. And there are other proteins there. So the thick and the thin filament are referred to as my contractile proteins. Does it make sense that they are called contractile proteins? Because they are the ones that accomplish contraction. So I want to look at this thick and thin filament. I'm going to go to this picture over here. Okay? Too fast? You all good, everybody? What do you think? What do you think? Okay? Okay. So, let's go. Let's look at this thick and thin filament. This is, look at this one first. This is the thick filament, okay? This is myosin. This is the thin filament. This is actin. So, they in this slide, look, they just highlighted the thick filament, the myosin. And the book describes the myosin as looking like inverted golf clubs, okay? And the book says it's the myosin. It's made up of a head, we call it a head, and the head is in a cocked position like this. It is ready to grab the actin on each cell over here, you see? So look at, the way I try to remember, the myosin is a bully because it is big. And it can just toss that actin on each side very easy, no problem, right? Or, I always use the example, remember, it's in a cocked position, it's ready to pull on that actin. Bring it to the center right away, okay? I also use the example of the boyfriend and the girlfriend, right? So the boyfriend is ready to kiss the girl, but then there's the parents blocking, right? So you have to pull the parents out of the way, then that kissing can happen. So look at this picture over here. Normally, when muscle is resting, so this is myosin. Up here is my thin filament, is my actin. This is this one, okay? So this is ready, but look at actin. Actin has the binding sites. So this active site is the site for binding. That is where the myosin will kiss or will hold on. But normally, that binding site, let's say the binding site is here, okay? Normally, that binding site is covered. Okay, so there's a covering. That binding site is normally covered. Muscle contraction uses up a lot of energy. So if it's not meant to contract, it will not contract. So myosin is ready. But it can't latch on because the binding site is covered. What covers it are two proteins called troponin, tropomyosin. Okay? So Mr. and Mrs. T, right? Mr. T, you remember Mr. T? So look at, they're covering the binding site of what? Of actin. Why actin? I try to remember actin is the poor thin person. So you need to protect the thin person. Whereas myosin is heavyweight. No need to protect that, okay? So the actin, again, normally at rest, Myosin is already ready. It's just waiting for actin to be exposed. But actin is always covered at rest by the two Mr. and Mrs. T, troponin, tropomyosin. So does it make sense that Mr. and Mrs. T are referred to as your regulatory proteins? Because it depends on them whether contraction will happen or not, right? So you have to call on those. Get out of the way. What will tell them to get out of the way is calcium. You see? So when there's calcium, calcium will go over here, okay? And they will cause a change because they're nothing but proteins. They change their configuration so that the active site of actin will roll like this, and it will now be exposed to myosin. So normally, the active site of actin is covered, but by troponin, tropomyosin. When there's calcium, troponin, tropomyosin moves out of the way. Now actin is ready, and then myosin will just grab it and push it towards, pull it towards its center. Contraction will happen. Just imagine, sarcomere after sarcomere after sarcomere, all the actins being pulled towards the center, muscle will shorten. Do you follow what you think? Okay, let me look at, I will show you right here, you see, look. Again, look at. So we include in this picture, there was a nerve stimulation, right? Nerve. So normally there is covered, this two pink, it's covered, the binding site is right there, you see. The binding site is those dark spots. This is my actin, the yellow one. And this blue one, that's the Mr. and Mrs. T, troponin, tropomyosin. This pink thing right here, pink thing, that's calcium. You see? So when after nerve stimulation, right, you generate muscle action potential, which causes the release of calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And calcium goes to Mr. and Mrs. T, the actin. So it tells them it's just a kiss, so can you get out of the way? So look, it will cause this Mr. and Mrs. T to get out. Look at, when it got out of the way, look at what happens. This is now exposed, see? You see? So myosin can latch. Normally, look at, it can't latch because it's covered. But because of what calcium does, it moves it. So now look at, the binding sites are exposed. So look, myosin can bind. So that is what you mean by excitation, contraction, coupling. Now I want to see what happens when this myosin finally grabs it. How does muscle shorten? When it grabs it, it will pull the actin on each end, it will pull it that way to the center. The actual contraction process is described as sliding filament. Understand that none of these proteins, whether it's actin or myosin, none of them actually shorten. What is going on is that the actin is being pulled towards the center, right here. You see? Look, when muscle shortens or when muscle contracts, look at the myosin. This is the myosin, the dark one. It will pull the actin to the center. Look, just pulling it to the center. Do you see that? Did the length of the actin shorten? No. It was just pulled to the center. Did the length of the myosin shorten? No. There's no shortening of the individual filaments. there is just what? Pulling towards the center. By what? Myosin. Which one was pulled? Actin. This is what's referred to as sliding filament mechanism. So, what do you think? Muscle contraction is actually an active process. What do you mean when you see the word active process? Always think anything that says any process that they say is active, as far as physiology is concerned, it must involve nerve stimulation. Muscle relaxation is passive. There is no nerve that will tell the muscle to relax. So we're going to visit muscle relaxation in a minute. But do you have any questions so far in muscle contraction? So now if we go back to this slide over here, the story of muscle contraction right here. Now we connect the dots. Now you understand excitation, contraction, coupling. And now you understand this actual process called sliding filament mechanism. Okay? So I want to look at a sarcomere because that is the basic functional unit of muscle. Okay? And I'm going to compare a sarcomere at rest and a sarcomere when it contracts right here. When you look at a sarcomere, there are different zones. If this will be given in the test, I will already label the different zones for you. You just tell me what will happen to this sarcomere when it contracts. I do not give a sarcomere at rest and when it contracts. I will just give you a sarcomere at rest if I was going to give you this one. Okay? But I'm already going to label the different zones for you. So you need to, so you just tell me, my question will also be, what will happen to the following when the sarcomere or when muscle contracts? So let us analyze. This is the whole sarcomere. This from here to here is the whole sarcomere. And there's different zones. So first, this is the A band. The A band is the dark. You don't need to identify, just understand. The A band is the dark. What makes it dark? What makes it dark is the myosin. What did I say? Myosin stays put. It doesn't go anywhere. It is the actin that is moving, okay? It's being pulled to the center. The myosin stays put. You need to remember that. The I band is because of the actin. Because the actin is thin, that's the one that lends to the lightness, the light part of the striation. So the I band is the actin. Okay? So there is a part in the sarcomere where the actin and the myosin overlap. And it makes sense that there must be an overlap, right? Because if there was no overlap, how can myosin pull, right? So there is, this is called the overlapping zone or zone of overlap. Again, I will label this for you already. And there is a specific zone within the A band that is just occupied by myosin itself. So the end of each sarcomere is called the Z line. Now let's analyze. My question, what do you think will happen to the sarcomere when muscle contracts? The answer choices will either be increase, decrease in length, or no change. What do you think will happen to the entire sarcomere when it contracts?
No change.
Increase, decrease, or no change?
No change.
Decrease. When sarcomere contracts, isn't it pulled towards the center? So there's a decrease. The sarcomere. When muscle contracts, this is at rest. And I'm asking you, tell me what will happen to the sarcomere when it contracts. When it contracts, because the actin is pulled towards the center, it must decrease in length, right? will decrease. What about to the zone of overlap, where the actin and myosin overlaps? What do you notice? Increase, decrease, what did you say? Very good. Clear? Better?
Yeah.
How about, what do you think? This H zone, which is just occupied by only the myosin, what will happen to this one when it contracts?
Decrease.
Yes, very good. It will decrease, won't it? The H zone, it will decrease. What do you think will happen to the length of the myosin filament? Increase, decrease, no change.
It's not going to change because
Very good. No change for either the myosin or the actin. Because what happened? There was only sliding. There is no changing of the shape or folding. It was just sliding. So the individual filaments, no change. Okay? So
Each zone with what?
the H
Oh,
zone
decrease, I see.
decrease. Okay? So again, in the past, I had this sarcomere. What you need, as long as you remember two important things. You need to remember that the individual filaments do not shorten. And you also need to remember that the entire sarcomere shortens. If you remember those two things, you can predict what will happen. Right? And I will already label for you if this was going to come out. Do you follow? I want you to look closely at this zone of overlap and analyze that in terms of this slide over here. Look at this one. Okay? Look at the zone of overlap. There is such a thing as an optimum zone of overlap, which is right here. Okay? Look at, when this muscle is already in this state, do you think this will contract anymore?
It can.
It can't because it's fully contracted. How about over here? Will this contract? I don't think so. I don't see the overlap anymore. Right? So this is the reason why, you know, when we watch the Olympics or whatever athlete, you see them in their specific stance, right? It's not because they want to look sexy or cute. Physiologists, they study these different positions. And they want you to achieve the perfect position to get to this part right here, you see. That way, your muscles will contract most efficiently and it will help you get the gold medal. Does it make sense? This slide should remind you of the importance of warm up and cool down. So maybe me and
Javon today.
maybe we have the same everything, right? We're doing the same exercise, same age, everything. But she's losing weight and I'm not. Maybe what's going on is after the exercise, she pulls down, I don't. So tomorrow when I go back, do my exercise, I'm over here. I'm not going to burn as much energy as she will, you see. Your goal is always to get to this optimal zone of overlap. So what this one, I don't like this slide over here, this stretching all the way. So you see, if you know, some people, they want to force themselves and they say, I tore my muscle. It's possible to do that. And this is scary when it comes to your heart, right? When you have a heart and an enlarged heart, they say, that's no joke. Because you stretch it. It can stretch, yes, we know there's elastic fibers, but it can only stretch to a certain point. When you stretch it to here, the heart will not pump anymore, you see. Right? Same with any muscle. So that's why I hope this slide makes sense. Okay? I think we will stop here, and then we start with muscle metabolism. We're almost done with muscle. So please, when you go home, it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Don't